February 2022. The West unleashed what they called the most devastating sanctions in modern history. The goal? Cripple Russia's economy within months, collapse the ruble, trigger mass unemployment. 3 years later, Russia's economy grew 4.1% in 2024. They're selling more oil than before the war started. Your gas bill doubled, but Russia? They just rerouted everything. So either sanctions don't work, or someone's lying to you. Over 16,000 sanctions, $300 billion in frozen reserves, banned from SWIFT, cut off from Western finance. This should have been economic annihilation. Actually follow it, not what cable news spoon feeds you. You'll discover something the mainstream narrative buries. Sanctions didn't destroy Russia's economy. They redesigned the global financial system. And the consequences? They're reshaping your world right now. Stay with me. What I'm about to show you isn't speculation. It's satellite data, ships operating in the dark, and a ghost economy so vast, Western intelligence agencies can't track it. Here's where the story gets weird. In early 2022, the EU banned Russian oil. The US imposed a $60 per barrel price cap. Russia should have lost 40% of federal revenue overnight. Except Russia's crude exports in 2024, 4.5 million barrels per day, nearly identical to pre-war levels. Where did it go? India. In 2024, India imported 34% of all Russian crude, up from nearly zero before 2022. China took another 26%. But here's the twist. That oil doesn't stay in India. Indian refineries process Russian crude into gasoline and diesel, then export it back to Europe. Europe banned Russian oil, then bought it from India with a markup. Brilliant strategy. Chef's kiss. You can't make this up. Western sanctions created a middleman economy. Russia still gets paid, Europe still gets fuel, and India pockets the arbitrage. Now here's the part that'll blow your mind. Meet Rajesh. He works at a refinery in Gujarat. Before 2022, his plant processed Middle Eastern crude. Today, 90% Russian. He told a reporter, "We don't ask where it comes from. We just refine it and ship it to Rotterdam." Rotterdam, that's the Netherlands, heart of Europe. So when you fill up your car in Berlin or Paris, there's a decent chance you're burning Russian oil that took a vacation through India. The system isn't broken, it's just wearing a disguise. If you're still watching and thinking, there's no way this is legal, you're right to be suspicious. Drop an oil barrel emoji in the comments if you want me to show you the shadow fleet. 600 ships, no insurance, no tracking, operating like ghosts. And hit subscribe, because what I'm about to reveal next makes the oil rerouting look like child's play. Imagine you're a ship captain. A shell company offers you $200,000 for one voyage, 3 times your annual salary. The catch? You turn off your transponder mid-ocean. No AIS signal, no location data. If something goes wrong, engine failure, storm, pirate attack, nobody's coming to rescue you. No Western insurance, no Coast Guard. Would you take the job? Hundreds of captains did. As of January 2026, Russia operates over 600 tankers in what's called the shadow fleet, aging vessels bought through anonymous LLCs registered in Liberia, Gabon, the Marshall Islands. Most are 15 to 20 years old, rusting hulls held together by duct tape and desperation. These ships are invisible. They load crude at Russian Arctic ports like Murmansk, sail through international waters with transponders off, then reappear near India or China days later. Sometimes they transfer cargo ship to ship in the middle of the ocean, a practice called dark STS transfers. 2 tankers meet in the dead of night. No port, no records, just crude pumping from one hull to another under the cover of darkness. The UK government announced plans to seize these vessels and sell the oil to fund Ukraine. Good luck. Most are flagged in countries that don't cooperate with Western law enforcement. Ownership? hidden behind 7 layers of shell companies in Dubai, Hong Kong, and the British Virgin Islands. You want to know how deep the rabbit hole goes? One tanker, the Andromeda Legacy, was tracked by satellite making 14 trips between Russia and India in 2024. It's officially owned by a company registered in the Marshall Islands. That company is owned by another company in Panama, which is owned by a trust in Dubai. The beneficial owner? Unknown. The UK Treasury tried to sanction it. The ship changed its name, repainted its hull, and kept sailing. The Shadow Fleet isn't a secret. It's just too big to stop. But ghost ships are just the delivery system. The real question is, how do they get paid when Russia's banned from SWIFT? When the West froze $300 billion in Russian reserves and kicked their banks out of the global payment network, they made a fatal assumption that there was no alternative. Wrong. Let me tell you a story. November 2022. A Chinese refinery in Shandong needs to pay for Russian crude. Can't use SWIFT, can't use dollars. So what happens? The refinery opens an account at a Russian bank connected to SPFS, Russia's domestic payment system, transfers yuan directly. The Russian bank converts it to rubles. Settlement takes 48 hours. No Western intermediary, no dollar involved. SPFS was created in 2014 after Crimea sanctions, largely ignored by the world. Today it connects over 100 banks across 20 countries. Enter CIPS, China's cross-border interbank payment system, the yuan-based answer to SWIFT. Transactions quintupled between 2022 and 2025. Enter direct currency swaps, bilateral agreements where countries trade in their own currencies, skipping dollars entirely. Russia now settles 90% of its trade with China in rubles and yuan. India uses rupees for oil purchases. The UAE's Dubai became a clearinghouse for gold-backed settlements. Think about what just happened. The West weaponized the dollar and accidentally taught the rest of the world how to stop using it. Here's the kicker. It's not just Russia. Saudi Arabia started settling oil trades in yuan. Brazil and Argentina trade in their own currencies. Even France floated the idea of strategic autonomy from the dollar system. The BRICS summit in 2025 floated proposals for a shared digital currency. It didn't happen, yet. But the infrastructure is being built, slowly, quietly, and irreversibly. Sanctions didn't kill Russia's economy. They killed dollar hegemony. And once that genie's out of the bottle, it's not going back in. Now let's talk about the part nobody wants to admit. Europe cut off Russian gas imports by 87.8% after the invasion. Noble goal, right? Stand with Ukraine. Punish the aggressor. Except Europe didn't have alternatives ready. Germany, the industrial engine of the EU, reduced gas consumption by 41 terawatt hours per winter. Sounds like conservation and green energy wins, right? Wrong. Meet Klaus. He worked at a chemical plant in Bavaria for 22 years. The plant produced ammonia, critical for fertilizers. Ammonia production requires massive amounts of natural gas. In October 2022, gas prices spiked to 10 times normal levels. The plant couldn't afford to operate. It shut down. Klaus was laid off along with 600 co-workers. The plant never reopened. The jobs never came back. 76% of Germany's reduced gas consumption came from lower industrial production, not efficiency. Chemical plants, steel mills, fertilizer factories, the energy-intensive industries that make modern life possible shut down or relocated to the US and Asia. Germany deindustrialized in silence, while politicians celebrated reducing dependence on Russian energy. Meanwhile, Russia pivoted, sold to Asia, rerouted pipelines. By 2025, they'd adapted. Europe? Still paying 3 to 5 times more for LNG shipped from the US and Qatar. So who won the sanctions war? Russia's economy slowed to 0.6% growth in Q3 2025, down from 4% a year earlier. But Europe deindustrialized, energy costs exploded, and Russia built alternative trade routes that no longer depend on the West. Congratulations, we sanctioned ourselves. Here's what the data shows. Russia's fossil fuel export revenues fell 20% in 2025. Sounds like a win, right? Except they didn't collapse. They adjusted. The discount on Russian crude widened to $24 per barrel below international benchmarks, but volume stayed steady. India and China kept buying. The shadow fleet kept sailing. And here's the kicker. Every neutral country watching the West freeze Russian assets asked the same question. Could they do that to US? Think about it. If you're Saudi Arabia, sitting on trillions in dollar-denominated assets, you just watched the West seize $300 billion from Russia overnight. No trial, no warning, just frozen. What do? You diversify. Start trading in yuan, buy gold, build alternative payment systems. Sanctions were supposed to isolate Russia. Instead, they fractured the global financial order. The dollar is still king, for now. But the coronation of alternatives has begun. And once countries realize they don't need dollars to trade, the leverage Washington has held for 80 years starts to evaporate. Let me be clear. This isn't a defense of Russia. This is a warning about unintended consequences. When you weaponize the financial system, you create demand for alternatives. When you freeze assets, you teach other countries to diversify reserves. When you ban oil, you teach producers to find new buyers. Economic warfare works until it doesn't. The 2020s will be remembered as the decade the dollar's monopoly began to crack. Not because of a grand conspiracy, but because the West overplayed its hand. Next time you see a headline screaming devastating sanctions, ask yourself, devastating for whom? Because right now, Europe is paying $200 billion extra for energy. Klaus lost his job in Bavaria. Russia is selling oil through ghost ships. And somewhere in Beijing, financial engineers are building the payment systems of tomorrow. The sanctions didn't fail. They succeeded at accelerating exactly what they were designed to prevent. Remember that number from the beginning? 4.1% GDP growth in Russia 2024? Now you understand why it matters. Not because Russia won, but because the old rules are dying. And the new ones? They're being written by countries that learned the hard way. Never trust a system that can freeze your money overnight. Stay until the end of the description. I've linked the sources. Satellite tracking data for the shadow fleet. IMF reports on energy substitution. BRICS payment system documentation. All public, all verifiable. Because the truth isn't hidden. It's just inconvenient. If this video made you rethink what you thought you knew, share it. The algorithm hates counter-narratives. Prove them wrong.